Right before my 21st birthday, I ended up getting a minor consumption, and instead of going and taking care of probably a small fine or a few days in jail, I decided to just run away to the carnival because that was my pattern in life. Is just every time a situation came up, I would just run away from the problem. I grew up in a family of addicts too. You know what I mean? My mom was a hippie, dad was a biker. And which I never really knew my dad till I was about 25 years old. Past caught up with me. I ended up started using again and quit my job. I was drinking a lot. I just was homeless at the park at Pioneer Park. There was a woman that was in trouble. She was being held at knife point. I went down there and trying to be a tough guy, and I went in there and I said, okay, who's got the knife? And long story short, the guy ended up stabbing me about 13 times in the face, arms.
Wow, I can see the
had
mark on
a
your
broken
face.
rib. She ended up passing away. That was basically my rock bottom.
Welcome to Utah Stories. My name is Richard Markosian. If you are familiar with our content and coverage, we've been covering the homeless epidemic, the drug epidemic, how to solve the problem of homelessness and drugs, and basically the large number of people who are homeless in downtown Salt Lake City and or addicts who cannot quit. And so we've been doing an ongoing series with participation with the Other Side Academy in bringing on people who can provide insight and shed light on these topics. And it's my pleasure to have on the program today, Jeff. What's your last name, Jeff?
Jeffrey Kaiser-Plante.
Jeffrey Kaiser-Plante.
Last names, yeah, it's
Awesome.
a fun one. So.
Well, thanks for coming on today. Your story is pretty fascinating because it's not a typical story about how you became homeless, but you are a carny kid. Like you ran off to join the carnival, and I find that really fascinating. You want to just give us a little bit of background into that?
Yeah. So it started at around the age of 21, or right before my 21st birthday. I ended up getting a minor consumption, and instead of going and taking care of probably a small fine or a few days in jail, I decided to just run away to the carnival because that was my pattern in life. Is just every time a situation came up, I would just run away from the problem. So that lasted for about 12 years. I would join the carnival for a few years, go back. I'm originally from Minnesota, so I would go back to Minnesota, get a job for a little while. Me and my mom would get in an argument or something because I wasn't paying rent. And then I would end up just getting a bus ticket back to another carnival. And I just kept doing that, which ended that. So the way that I ended up in Utah was I met a woman at the carnival, ended up getting pregnant. She's from Utah. So we went back to Minnesota, had the baby, and then we moved out here. And everything was great. I stopped drinking, stopped using. That was great for a little while. And then, the past caught up with me. She started talking to old friends, and, I ended up started using again and quit my job. I was drinking a lot again, and, we ended up getting into a physical altercation, and where I went to jail. We both got charged with domestic violence, and that's where I left there. I left her mom's house and then went to the rescue mission. Well, really, before I went to the rescue mission, I just was homeless at the park, at Pioneer Park. So that's where it all started.
And that's where you
And
get
here in
into a lot
Utah,
of trouble.
Oh, yeah.
So I gotta ask, what would you do in the carnival? What was your job?
Well, I did anything from rides, games. I started out in rides, and then I ran the water race. You shoot the water into, it was a Tasmania. Fill up the balloon, pop the balloon, first person to
Oh
win.
yeah, no,
Yep, pick anything in the game. So
yeah. And so, just to recap, and you had the carnival to escape into anytime you were getting into trouble and feeling the heat.
Yep.
You could just join the carnival.
Yep.
And then you met a woman you loved, and then you guys had a baby together. But I guess when you're using your thought processes or your decisions are never going to be great.
Yeah.
And so with the physical altercation you got into, that really turned your life upside down, where you realized, okay, I have no other option than to sleep and camp in the park and probably use drugs at that time.
Yep.
And so you found yourself there. And how long did you spend in the basically living homeless in the park?
Well, so that's where it started, was in Pioneer Park, and then I joined the New Life program at the rescue mission. I was clean and sober for about 9 months. Somebody in there offered me meth, and I was right back to it. Shortly, about a month later, failed a UA, got kicked out back onto the streets. And then for about, I want to say for around 6 years, I lived up in the canyons up by the Capitol.
Oh, wow.
Yep. So,
The mountain, they call it, right?
yep. And I justified it because I would go pick up trash along the highway. So everybody driving to the Capitol, they seen I was doing a good deed. So it was like, it's okay for me to live up here, when really the 20, 25 people up there were just trashing the place. And
I spent some time up there. There's some like serious encampments
Yeah.
with like
yeah.
beds and really nice tarps and setups and electricity maybe. And
it became really comfortable to live up there because the bread lady's house is right down the street from there. We would just go there and get food and then go back up to the canyon. And even through the winter times, there was some pretty harsh winters, and I knew that I needed to do something different with my life, and all the tools were out there, but it was just easier to stay up there and isolate, basically. So,
and it's a community of people,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, one gal we interviewed a couple of times just pretty much lives up there still, but it's basically a drug community. Like, is everybody using drugs?
Yeah.
Yeah. And at what point were you like, okay, now I got to do something drastic?
So this is where this kind of gets a little graphic, but I'm not afraid to share it. So there was a time where somebody was in trouble. There was a woman that was in trouble, and somebody came and told me. So she was being held at knife point, and there was an altercation about a cell phone or something. Somebody's cell phone got stolen, or
This was at the encampment.
this was down by the bread lady's house, down by the 7-Eleven there. So I called her my street mom. She came and got me and said, "Hey, Candace is in trouble. We need to go help her." So me trying to be a hero, I went down there to the dumpster area. It used to be a dollar store. Now it's like a hardware store or something like that. But I went down there and trying to be a tough guy, and I went in there and I said, "Okay, who's got the knife?" And long story short, the guy ended up stabbing me about 13 times in the face, arms.
Oh, I can see them.
Had a broken rib, severed aortic artery, and she ended up passing away. So that was a pretty tragic. So that was basically my rock bottom. Even though I was already at rock bottom.
Did she pass away because of that knife fight?
Yeah, she ended up getting stabbed over 40 times.
Oh my gosh.
So
wow.
Yeah. And from there started my paranoia, because I thought everybody was out to get me. For about a year that lasted. I never went to the doctor. Well, so I went to the hospital after getting stabbed, and I flatlined twice on the way to the hospital. And when I was in the hospital, I was in a coma for 4 days. That's the last time that I seen my son. His adoptive parents came and brought him to see me, and he didn't even know I was his father, because he was about 4 at the time, and the last time I seen him, he was still a baby. So that was a wake-up call. And then shortly after that, they released me from the hospital, and I was just back at square one.
Can I ask you, did you have any contact with your biological parents? Did they know you had been stabbed?
Yeah, so my mom ended up finding out, and I was talking to her on Facebook, and then, she didn't know whether to come stay with me out here, and I'm like, well, I'm homeless, you know what I mean? Like, my mom she's been homeless too, on and off, and through addiction and everything. She's passed away now, and so a year after I was stabbed, that's when I found out that my mom had passed away.
Oh, wow.
And my sister had reached out to me, and
She had passed. She had been sometime. She had been passed away when you discovered that she
Yeah,
was.
yeah. So she had a bad heart and everything, but so yeah, that was, and this whole time I'm running the streets terrified because they didn't know who stabbed me and everything. I had all my cuts and everything were infected. I still had staples and everything, and I never went and got them taken care of.
Wow.
So I'm lucky I didn't die from like sepsis or something. You know what I mean? So, um,
And
I
that's what happens if you're homeless and you get stabbed. They just release you.
yeah,
They don't say come back every
no.
couple of days and get your
Well,
wounds.
I didn't have medical insurance or anything, so it was
Wow.
yeah, but so that was really the end of the line. I went into like a psychosis, from being on methamphetamines and everything, thinking people were chasing me. Ended up calling the police on myself, thinking, being terrified. And luckily I had a warrant and I had to talk them into taking me to jail because this was right around the time where they were doing the cleaning up the block and everything. So they weren't taking anybody without serious charges into jail because there were so many people in jail. And luckily they took me in and I sat in jail for, I want to say about 3 months. And that's when I found a flyer for the Other Side Academy. And I wrote them and I was accepted. But my public defender didn't, he's telling me, well, you don't need to go to the Other Side Academy. We're just going to release you on probation. And I'm telling him, I'm like, well, no, I need to go somewhere because this is going to be an endless thing to where I'm just going to keep going back to jail, being homeless.
You knew that. You
Yeah,
had
so
that insight, despite being
Right.
a meth addict, that this is going to be a bad pattern.
Yeah, so I talked him into letting me go to the Other Side Academy and staying in jail a couple extra days until the Other Side Academy came and picked me up.
Wow.
Yeah.
That was like we had Jackie Tress on the story,
Mhm.
and you watched the decline of her appearance as she did meth more and more and more.
Mhm.
But somehow this light bulb switch went on in her, even in her meth addicted brain, that I'm gonna die if I don't change.
Yeah.
Was that kind of like, is that how it worked for you?
Well, by the time that I got to the Other Side Academy, I weighed about 140 pounds, and that was from being in jail after 3 months. So I don't know what I weighed going in there. And from not, I lost all my teeth from not brushing my teeth, and of course the being in the lifestyle and everything, and just all the infections and everything. I'm I'm surprised like I didn't have some kind of bloodborne disease or anything, and I didn't die. You know what I mean from
Mhm.
all the stab wounds and everything. So I
Yeah.
was pretty lucky.
But it just clicked that you have to do this academy, even though it's 30 months.
Yeah,
It's a rigorous trial. You got to be clean the whole time. You just knew you could do it.
at that point I didn't care what it took to do it. I knew I needed to do something different with my life.
hmm So what was it like your first few months in the academy?
Well, the first couple years actually it was I had a major attitude problem, anger issues, and I didn't see that. Everybody tell me about myself and tell me how I was emotionally immature, and it was not easy for me to take feedback, um, yelling and screaming matches in groups and everything. So it finally clicked about 2 years into it. So um, yeah, it was rough. It was rough, but
Yeah, the behavior boot camp aspect of it, it's like I think that's the perfect terminology because I we've worked with foster kids who had no basic upbringing and respect for the people they had relationships with. And is that just something that you were never raised with either? Like that, just the respect element when you're in a work environment, when you're, is that something that's common to the people who go in there? Or how
I'm
would
not sure. I'm not sure I understand the question.
so it's like, so I tell my kids, because of the experience I've done in my reporting,
Mhm.
number one, you have to be respectful to people.
Yeah.
You cannot be talking back. You cannot be calling people names. You cannot be treating your brother or your sister this way because you'll never have any friends if you're like this. So when you look at the Other Side Academy and their culture and what they're trying to instill in people, is it behavior deficiency that leads to the drug addiction, or is it the drug addiction that creates the behavior? Does that make sense?
I would say it was the drug addiction that creates a behavior, because I grew up in a very respectful family, but also I grew up in a family of addicts too. You know what I mean? My mom was a hippie, dad was a biker, and which I never really knew my dad till I was about 25 years old. I did, but I didn't. I didn't know he's my father. But it just became,
He wasn't in the picture really.
yeah. But it just became a normal thing to like smoke pot with my mom and cousins and aunts and uncles. You know what I mean? So that was just.
But you were respectful.
Yeah, well, we were yeah, very much so. By no means did I have a poor childhood. Yeah. So
That's interesting. Yeah, because it's like I've also interacted with the community of people who are into the 12-step program for AA, and the way it's been explained to me is they say typically it's my behaviors which led to the alcoholism, which is why you have to do so much reflection and work on your past relationships and what you went through. And so it's kind of like when you look at criminal justice reform, which it really needs to happen, which Other Side Academy is really on this point of the tip of the spear in learning, and you see that culture and the environment they create, do they just have a very low tolerance for disrespect so that you really come after 2 years of struggling with it, you understand you just simply do not disrespect people? Or is it just that the people who go to that program don't have a high enough bar of respect?
well, there's it's a different population there. People coming in out of prison, and the whole respect aspect is already there because people respect each other in a certain way in prison. But when you're yelling and screaming at each other in groups, the people that have been here, the students that have been there longer, they won't put up with that, because if you're not taking feedback, you're not learning anything. If you're always fighting everything and fighting what they say, you're not going to learn. And that's what clicked for me, is like, I better just shut my mouth and listen to what these people are saying, because they've been through it, done it. And who better to point out my flaws than somebody who has the same flaws?
Yeah.
So,
when we examine the reason why some of these other programs don't work nearly as effectively, obviously the lived experience is a huge component of Other Side Academy. Is that what gave you buy-in, that these people had already gone through similar things to what I've gone through? Or what would you say is
I didn't know what I was getting into when I first went there. It was all new to me, but I never had an issue with like authority or anything. So I think it was just hearing about myself is what set me off, because I didn't want to face my own problems. I can point out problems in everybody else, but take a look at my own stuff. You're crazy.
Yeah.
So,
but you went through the program, you kind of sailed through it, and or did you ever have to restart? Or
I never restarted. There was a few times where I wanted to leave, but I didn't, luckily. And I stayed for 4 years because, one, I was too scared to go back out there, because I knew that I've never been able to hold a job down or anything, even though that I've was at the academy for 4 years and basically had a job for 4 years at the thrift store. That to me wasn't good enough. I was afraid to go back out on the streets and go back into the same cycle. And two, I knew I had more to work on. After it's a 2.5 year program, but like Dave always says, it's really a 4 year program. So
yeah. And so how did you get the job as a coach for the village?
So when towards the end of my 4th year, I just knew I wanted to do something that was fulfilling. I didn't want to go work a dead end job, and I was already loving what I was doing at the academy, helping save lives. And I knew that's what I wanted to continue doing. When the village first opened up, I I seen myself there because, 25 years of on and off the streets. What else? What other kind of lived experience do you need?
Mm.
But so, and I just love, in the lifestyle, you're chasing a different high now. Like the high that you get from helping other people, the same broken people that the lifestyle that you came from. There's no other feeling. I don't know how to. There's like no words you can even put to it. So
Yeah. Yeah, and you get a sense of that spirit both at the academy and the village.
mhm.
It's just people are happy to be there and they're
Yeah.
happy to be alive.
Oh yeah.
And like I was just blown away when I saw the construction crew. Like usually guys on a construction crew are smoking cigarettes, they're looking at their phone, they're waiting for their shift to end. Those guys were just waiting for their turn to do the hard work, which is going to make them sweat and feel good. And it was just like, how do you do that?
Yeah.
And it's like that's a really incredible culture and attitude that they instill in people. And it's I would say it's like almost polar opposite to the culture that exists kind of out in the real world.
Mhm.
And so what is it? I mean, what's the secret sauce? How would you describe it?
I always I think it's the sense of belongingness. That's even from the you feel like you belong from the day that you walk through the door, and then the sense of accomplishment, even through call offs at the academy, or even at the village when people get crew boss positions.
What's a
Or
call off?
call offs is a graduation.
Oh,
So
okay.
you go freshman to sophomore, junior, so on. So even down to the colored shirts. I was proud to wear a red shirt as a freshman, freshman scholar. It's not a sense of like, hey, I've arrived, but it's a sense of accomplishment, so through that it creates belongingness. That's
Mhm.
that's what I believe. It's all about belongingness. So
Yeah, to belong to something bigger than
yeah, it's
yourself
a
and
family.
working on something bigger.
So
Yeah. So, a lot of these podcasts, we try to get out to our audiences, part of the homeless community. We know a lot of homeless people watch this because we interview a lot of them. What would you say to people on the street right now who are on drugs, in a bad place, can't get back on their feet? Um, what words of advice would you have for them?
I would say that whole person change is not easy. Um, but would you rather go through the hard times of whole person change, or go through the hard times of where am I going to get my next meal? Where am I going to get my next fix? Who's the next person I'm going to rob? Do I have to have I got people watching me, all the paranoia, everything that compared to the struggles you go through whole person change, they don't match up, Um, the help is out there. You just got to find it.
Yeah.
So,
And then I also look at this growing homeless epidemic. I mean, I kind of look at it in two ways. Anytime you have a growing population, you're going to have a growing number of homeless people, like we have in Salt Lake. And every year we have more and more homeless people who come here and who are also part of Utah, and they just congregate down there. Um, why do you think that population is growing, and why do you think that problem just seems to be getting worse and worse?
well, I think you become comfortable with, from life experience, you become comfortable not working, not having anything, but the survival mode. It just becomes like second nature, and that it just becomes who you are. So you get stuck in the survival mode instead of getting out of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and so you can't really think
Yeah.
in terms of a plan, like what you're gonna do over the next 3 months to get off the street. You're just thinking
You're
about
just
every
stuck, and
yeah.
you stay stuck until you get out of it. And I'm sure every person out on the street is just wondering, how do I get out of this? And really, you just have to do it. It's
What is it about our culture that's creating that, though? That's causing that homelessness to increase?
that's a tough question. Um, Repeat that question again.
So what about our culture? Like, if you look at pop culture, I don't know, music and everything people are being instilled with in the United States, the messaging, what is it in the culture that might be creating more homeless people or causing it?
That's that's a hard one to answer, because I don't know if it's the culture that's creating it. It's your own choice. It all comes down to your own choice of what you want to do with your life. And um it is it easy to live on the streets? It really is. It really is easy to live on the streets and waste your life away. But the people that become you have a huge difference of, like, people who lose their apartments, or because of COVID, and they're out on the streets, or veterans. There's those guys, and then there's kids who just want to run and gun, and just do their own thing and live in the addiction, and basically have fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it was for me. It was just like, okay, I'm used to this. I'm just gonna go hang out with my friend's house. My mom would tell me, well, if you're gonna run the streets all day, you might as well just go stay there. And I was like, okay, well, let's go run the streets then. So it's that maybe. Does that answer the question?
Yeah.
Because
I know.
that's the culture I
think
live
that
in.
sheds light on it, because
Yeah.
I'm like, I want to think that it's the lack of personal accountability. Like, kids are taught, oh, it's not my fault. That's the teacher's fault. Or it's my parents.
Mm,
It's my upbringing. It's this or that. Or, I was taking ADD meds as a kid, so now I want meth. And
mm,
so it's almost like that's kind of the excuse I put on it from just the reading I do. But it's interesting to hear that it's you just saying, no, it's just someone's decision to go out and want to play more
yeah.
and goof off and not have responsibility.
Yeah.
I think that's probably, that might be even more it than the lack of personal accountability.
Mhm.
But yeah, something. It's just strange to see going around downtown, more and more people out there camped out, and you're like, do you know about Tosa up there? Do you know about the village? And
Yeah.
so anyhow, I think that's about it. Yeah. So what's it like living at the village? How do you like it?
Well, the village is it's awesome. I mean, I never would imagine my life being where it is now 5 years ago, you know. You've met Jackie. Jackie and I are now in a relationship, which took a lot of patience. So she makes me really happy, and
Oh, that's awesome.
yeah. So
She's a really cool gal.
yeah. We have it made there at the village, to be honest. We have everything that life is about: it giving back to others, and having fun doing it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I went down there a couple days ago, and Joey's decided to join us. And it was amazing how many more houses they got in just in the
Yeah.
last couple months. It's like I saw probably 30 more houses than I saw the previous time. So it's just going to be a whole lot of people moving in. And
Yep. Pretty soon they're going to start doing landscaping and everything. You're going to start seeing more trees and flowers, and it's
that's
gonna look
great.
beautiful out there.
It's just it's unlike any other place, and I want to encourage people to go down and drive through, or go to one of you have open houses too once in a while, right?
Every once in a while, yeah.
Yeah, and go to the Other Side Donuts. They're just amazing donuts, and Other Side Movers, and the boutiques, and the thrift stores, and yeah, it's just super cool to see all that. So yeah. Well, thanks so much for coming on, Jeff.
Thank you.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. So if you want to be a bigger part of the Other Side Academy, I just hands down think it's the very best organization to help people who are struggling with homelessness, addiction, mental illness, and criminal justice reform. It's theothersideacademy.org. Is that right? Or is it com?
I believe it's .org.
.org.
I'm not positive.
We'll put the website graphic on the screen so we get it right. And if you happen to be watching and you're homeless, you're on the streets, you need some answers, I highly recommend go visit their bench that anybody can go visit. It's 6, I think it's just below 7th East and First South, correct?
Yep, 7th for South.
And there's a big building there, and there you can walk right in, you sit on a bench. That's like their intake center, and they can either accept you after a process, or they can direct you on where you should go. And it's an amazing program. They don't take any government funding, and it's all driven by support through their social enterprises. And it's been my pleasure to be working with them the last few months. And yeah, so go check them out. And if you want to support our podcast and our local journalism, it's utahstories.com is a monthly magazine that we've been printing for 15 years. You can subscribe to the magazine for $5 a month and become a member also on our website. And with that, will send you also Faces of Utah magazine as a contributing sponsor or supporter. That helps us out a ton because we can focus more on our local journalism and answering the question and continuing to answer the questions of why our homeless population is growing and what are the very best solutions that could solve that problem. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been Richard Markosian, and I will see you next time.